The shutdown is not the source of America's crisis, it is the spotlight revealing it. For months, government has been dismantled in plain view, hundreds of thousands of public servants forced out, programs erased, agencies hollowed, funds withheld, oversight bodies gutted. The scale is unprecedented, touching nearly every corner of federal capacity. This destruction is not an accident of budgets, but a deliberate campaign to shrink government until it can no longer function, and then to point to that collapse as proof of its uselessness. The shutdown matters because it interrupts this cycle. By prolonging the disruption, it makes undeniable that the absence of government is not efficiency gained, but necessity lost. The thesis is simple and unavoidable. The shutdown must be sustained until the illusion of government's irrelevance is broken and the public demands the restoration of what has been dismantled. This moment cannot be understood without its history. The current dismantling of federal institutions rests on a decades-long cultivation of public distrust. The turning point came in the Reagan era, when the claim that government is the problem became a central tenet of conservative rhetoric. That claim hardened into policy tax cuts, starved revenues, deregulatory campaigns rolled back protections, and budget caps ensured that public services were always fighting over shrinking scraps. By the 1990s and 2000s, this logic had become bipartisan orthodoxy. Austerity was sold as discipline, deregulation as modernization. Each retrenchment reinforced the idea that government was bloated and incompetent, while eroding the very capacity that made it effective. With the rise of Tea Party populism and later the Freedom Caucus, this strategy matured into outright sabotage. Shutdowns and debt-ceiling brinkmanship became routine tools. Manufacture crisis, paralyze institutions, and claim the paralysis proved that government does not work. This long cultivation of distrust set the cultural baseline for 2025. By the time the year began, a large portion of the public had been primed for decades to believe that less government was always better, even if that meant losing the very services on which they depended. Against this backdrop, the March 2025 continuing resolution was not a solution, but a postponement. Both parties admitted as much. Lawmakers called it buying time, not resolving disputes. Moderates insisted compromise was necessary to avoid an early year shutdown that could alienate voters, but everyone knew the conflict was merely delayed. The result was a spring and summer defined by stockpiling grievances, positioning for October, and, most significantly, implementing deep cuts that would shrink government before the next deadline arrived. March thus functioned as a hinge moment. By avoiding a fight, Congress gave room for dismantling to accelerate outside the spotlight. The continuing resolution kept lights on in the short term, but it created conditions for a more explosive confrontation once funding ran out again in the fall. The scale of what happened in the intervening months is staggering. Mass layoffs swept through the civil service, targeting upwards of 300,000 positions, nearly 12% of the federal civilian workforce. Agencies across education, health, science, foreign assistance, and oversight functions were hollowed, with entire program offices closed or restructured beyond recognition. Congress abetted this contraction through the Rescissions Act, clawing back billions in foreign aid and public broadcasting support. Meanwhile, the executive branch pushed even further, attempting to withhold or cancel funds already appropriated, crossing legal boundaries that the Government Accountability Office flagged as violations of the Impoundment Control Act. Watchdog institutions themselves were not spared. Funding for inspectors, general coordination was slashed, threatening the very capacity to police misconduct. By the time October arrived, the government was already a smaller, weaker institution than it had been just months earlier. The shutdown landed on top of an already diminished baseline, making the erosion impossible to ignore. What distinguished this round of dismantling was the brazenness of executive maneuver. Agencies were instructed to prepare reduction-in-force plans before the shutdown, signaling an intent to use a funding lapse not just as a temporary disruption, but as a pretext for permanent workforce shrinkage. Funds were withheld across multiple departments, reframing appropriations as discretionary, as though congressional control over spending were optional. This escalation demonstrates that the struggle is no longer about isolated cuts, but about the balance of power itself. What Congress appropriates the executive withholds. What agencies are staffed to do, leadership pares away. The dismantling is not only about reducing budgets, it is about rewriting the relationship between elected branches of government. By October 1st, the public sector was already bleeding capacity. The shutdown did not cause that bleeding, it made it visible. Services paused, paychecks stopped, and communities felt disruptions in daily life. For the first time, the erosion that had been happening quietly inside agencies became tangible for the public. This is why the shutdown matters. It forces the question, are these disruptions proof that government is incompetent, or proof that government has been sabotaged? In this way, the shutdown is not the dismantling, it is the confrontation with dismantling. The meaning of the shutdown will be decided in the contest of interpretation. Critics say the shutdown proves government is dysfunctional. Defenders insist it proves government's indispensability. Every missed check, every delayed benefit, every closed program becomes ammunition in this fight. Public opinion is the terrain on which the entire battle rests. If Americans accept the myth of irrelevance, dismantling accelerates. If they see the shutdown as proof of necessity, the arc can be reversed. The shutdown is not only a domestic reckoning, but a political and international one. With the 2026 midterms looming, both parties are testing narratives. Who will voters blame, and who will they credit with defending what remains? Globally, credit markets and allies are no longer treating US fiscal crises as episodic, but as structural, reflecting a country that appears to be dismantling itself. The shutdown therefore doubles as a signal to the world about whether the United States can sustain governance at all. The dismantling of government between March and October shows that hollowing institutions does not require a shutdown. It can be done quietly, through mass firings, rescissions, and executive impoundments. The shutdown, paradoxically, is the one event that forces this dismantling into public view. The choice is stark. Either the shutdown ends quickly, and dismantling continues in silence, or the shutdown is prolonged until the public turns decisively against the illusion of irrelevance. This is not a budget fight. It is a reckoning over whether Americans still believe they need government at all.